In Nigeria, we're really seeing what we call a slow motion ethnic cleansing campaign. There's a region of the country called the Middle Belt, where most of the indigenous people who live there are Christians from hundreds of different people groups. So most of the stories of persecution that come out of Nigeria come from this region called the Middle Belt. This is, yeah, probably the biggest persecution crisis in the world right now.
Welcome to Into the Supernatural. We are here today with Joel Veldkamp. Joel, how you doing?
Really good, thank God. How are you guys?
We're doing well. We're doing well. You know, one of the things when we check in with you, we'll talk about a specific issue that is going on with persecution around the world, oftentimes in one country or one specific issue. But today, we really wanted to dive in. You know, there are a number of organizations, as you know, and your organization has done this as well, who will sort of categorize the worst places in the world to be a Christian, or the places where persecution is sort of raging the most. And I asked you, offline, hey, where are the places that you would really want to hit on to let people know, based on the work that you guys do at Christian Solidarity International, that are just the worst right now, or that you're seeing the issues be most pronounced. And so let's dig into some of this. The first country, and we've talked a lot on the show about this, but it's important, for those who don't know, to kind of give a recap of what is happening first in Nigeria, because that is the worst place for Christian persecution in the country. So I'll let you kind of take it away and just help people understand what might be happening there.
Sure. In Nigeria, we're really seeing what we call a slow motion ethnic cleansing campaign. There's a region of the country called the Middle Belt, where most of the indigenous people who live there are Christians from hundreds of different people groups who are farmers. But there's another tribe, a Muslim tribe called the Fulani, who are moving into this area, and they are extremely well armed, and they formed a lot of militias. And for the past 8 years, really, they've been carrying out massacres of Christian villagers again and again and again on a weekly basis or more. So most of the stories of persecution that come out of Nigeria come from this region called the Middle Belt. And at least in the Christian media, you will get the headlines: 15 Christians killed, 20 Christians killed, 300 Christian schoolgirls abducted. But what all this adds up to is the slow expulsion of Christians from this region, from their homeland. So I was just reading some of our reports from the Palm Sunday massacres in this region of the Middle Belt this year, where 56 Christians were murdered. But aside from those 56 Christians, 2,000 Christians fled their homes, and they haven't been able to go back. So every time one of these massacres happens, the region slowly gets depopulated, and the militias move in with their new settlers, and the demography of the region is slowly changed. So it is a stream of massacres, but it's also a growing population of over 1 million people now who are just homeless, displaced, have no access to education or means of livelihood. This is, probably the biggest persecution crisis in the world right now.
Hey, I'm Billy Hallowell, and I have something to tell you. This is really, really important. It's about Christian Solidarity International, which is an organization that I absolutely love. Now, as hard as it might be for us to comprehend here in America, but there are people in other parts of the world, all over the world, whose very lives are being threatened simply because they believe in Jesus. In fact, people are being enslaved, very literally, for their faith. Some of these people have been detained for 25 or even 30 years. Now, if you've been listening to me for any period of time, you know that I am passionate about the work that Christian Solidarity International does. This is work to help the persecuted church all over the world. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are persecuted and enslaved in the Middle East alone. The headlines right now are obviously very focused on the Middle East, and so that's why I want to talk about this today. Now, together we can very literally, and this is amazing, buy their freedom and save the lives of some precious brothers and sisters in Christ right now. We can do that right now, giving them the joy and the hope that we celebrate here in America so freely. For only $250, you can provide life-saving aid. You can actually buy a believer's freedom and provide them with what they need: food, a goat, other necessary goods for their very survival. Now, these are brothers and sisters in Christ, enslaved and fearing for their lives. They need us. Now, let's get back to the $250. Maybe you can give more, maybe you can give even a portion, but every single gift helps. You can actually go right now to www.csi-usa.org, and you can do what you can right there to help. You'll see my picture when you scroll down. Click on that where it says give, and give whatever you can. That's www.csi-usa.org. Thank you so much.
Is anyone doing anything? I mean, I guess maybe Christian Solidarity International is, but are there groups or governments that are helping to evacuate any of these Christians and move them into a different place? Or is it sort of like, hey, if you move from Nigeria to Ethiopia, it doesn't really matter, same situation?
Yeah, I don't think anyone really wants to move to Ethiopia or neighboring countries right now. There is some help when people get displaced to other parts of Nigeria, but there's a strong desire to go back, and there's a strong desire
Sure.
not to lose the homeland completely.
Hmm.
In this part of the world, family and culture and the community is really tied to the land. When you have a piece of land that's
Sure.
yours that you can farm, that's stability, that's a future for your children. And once you lose that land, you're really kind of thrown to the winds in
Yeah,
a way.
absolutely. Hmm. Are there any Christian groups? And I have mixed feelings about this, and probably both of you do too. It's just a question I have in my head. Are there any groups that are training Christians how to fight back? And the reason I ask that, and I feel conflicted about it, it's like New Testament, you have turn the other cheek, you have Paul and Silas in prison, Peter, like they just don't, you don't resist, you just die for your faith. But then you have Old Testament, and I know we're in a new covenant, but it's like the commandment, thou shalt not kill, is actually a incorrect translation. The translation is actually thou shalt not murder. Murder means taking of the innocent life, which is how you can reconcile how David was a man after God's own heart, and yet, you know, the old adage or slogan, Saul killed his 1,000, David his 10,000s, and then he's a man after God's own heart. And so I don't really know what the answer is here, but at the same time, is there some sort of training among these Christians to defend themselves at all?
There is. I don't believe there are outside groups that are training these people, but
Hmm.
Christians in these villages have formed their own self defense associations,
Okay.
and they do try to protect their villages during these attacks. They also try to warn each other when
Yeah,
they get wind that an attack is coming. The problem is they're at a real disadvantage. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
when legally, there's only so many weapons you're allowed to own in Nigeria,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
often we find that the army and the security forces are rather one-sided when it comes to disarming people. So the Christian villages will get really heavily policed for what weapons they own at home, and then these militia groups come in on motorbikes wielding AK-47s and just kill everyone, and the resistance is almost it's very difficult to fight back. But there are some that are trying, and I'll hasten to warn your audience: I'm not a theologian. I'm not going to make a
Sure.
pronouncement whether Christians should try to defend themselves or not. But
Right.
Christians in Nigeria are, and
Well,
our mission at CSI is to be there for Christians who are being persecuted. So we don't
Absolutely.
try to
Yeah.
tell them what to do. We try to help.
That's right.
well,
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously, to your point too, Joel, if you do fight back, is the government going to defend you, right? Or are people going to say, oh, like when you have a government stacked against you, whether they're apathetic or hostile, depending on what country it is, and you're defending yourself? I mean, people are accused of all sorts of things that aren't even true when they're Christians, right? So now you have this situation where you're going out there, you're defending yourself, and you're really putting yourself at risk. It's an unimaginably difficult situation, and it makes me want to jump. Obviously, we hit Nigeria. We want to talk about Sudan too. And by the way, so people understand why we have this partnership with CSI on this show, we talk about everything, supernatural, right? We talk about miracles. We talk about, heaven, hell, NDEs, evil. And this falls under the category of evil. There are things happening all around this world that are unimaginably horrific. And a lot of people who are watching or listening, you may have no idea that these things are happening, and you need to be praying for the church and for the people who are undergoing and facing this persecution. That is why we have this partnership, and this work that they are doing at CSI is incredibly important. So, Joel, having said that, what is happening in Sudan?
So Sudan, I think, is a really good example of what you were just talking about, Billy. Because often when we see this kind of mass evil in the world, it tries to cloak itself in ideology and say we're doing this to liberate the working class, or we're doing this to bring true peace, or we're doing these terrible things to unite the world of Islam, for example. Different excuses, different ideologies that get brought forward to justify the mass violence deployed against innocent people. And in Sudan right now, we have a situation where no one is even really trying to pretend that there's a good reason for this. It's just a naked power struggle between two Islamist factions that used to run the country together and then turned on each other and have spent the last 3 years killing millions of people. Really, this is probably the worst war in the long history of wars that we've seen in Sudan since 1956.
Wow, that's incredible. Does Christian Solidarity International, you guys have a mailing list, I'm sure, right? Like
We
an
do.
email list where people can subscribe. Have you all ever asked the newsletter subscribers to fast for the situation? That's just something off the top of my head. I'm a big fan of fasting.
Hmm. That's a good idea. To my knowledge, we have not, but
I
I'll
feel
bring it
like we
up.
should fast. I mean, like, and if you do, let us know because I would join you in that fast. I'll talk about it on my social media. I'll get people activated because I just really believe, obviously, God wants to intervene.
Hmm.
God's not for the persecution of his people. Not that it won't happen. Obviously, we're promised it will happen, but I keep thinking of, Esther and different times in the Bible where it's like, this is happening. This is a massacre of people. Let's call a fast.
Yeah,
Why
thank you,
don't
Jen.
we why don't we call it, I mean, from our show for our audience right now, when this episode is dropping, it's going to be on, today is Friday when you're seeing this show, okay? So every Sunday, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, or we can call something else, but every Sunday from 10 p.m. until 3 p.m. on Monday, I fast. That's what I do on Sundays to Mondays. Why don't we just call people to do that this week? If this is on your heart and you feel like you want to join us, Sunday to Monday, we should fast for Sudan and Nigeria and the other countries we're talking about here. But I think specifically Nigeria and Sudan seem like they could use that. And I don't know, Jen, what do you think? I would say let's just
Yeah,
do it.
I think that's great. I think for people to make it easier on them, easier way to digest it, I would just say, don't eat till dinner.
Yeah, I have
Or
specific times. You don't have to follow my
yeah,
times.
you don't
Yeah,
have to follow Billy's timing. But also, I mean, and I think giving up food is very powerful. I think that is really powerful because talk about your flesh screaming. I mean, you've never been hungrier than 10 minutes after you start a fast. but but also if people are diabetic or hypoglycemic or they have some sort of issue, that medical issue where they cannot fast, I would say stay off social media. Like dedicate the morning to pray for Christian persecution really worldwide. Obviously, Sudan, Nigeria. I mean, where else would you say, Joel? It's everywhere, but like, what were the areas that you all talked about before we pressed record?
Yeah, today we wanted to talk about Pakistan, Armenia, Syria, Sudan, and Nigeria. I'm taking notes, both of you. So I'll probably join you when you do this fast after the episode launches. I'm not in the habit at all, but it sounds like a good habit to get into.
I
Yeah,
just got into the habit. Jen's always been in the habit. I just got into the habit probably a month and a half, 2 months ago. And I did a 3-day fast last week and it was pretty amazing. So I don't, yeah, to Jen's point, if you can't physically do it, find something else to fast from, right? Like social media or whatever it is. But um, I, yeah, I'm incredibly encouraged by that. So let's all do that. This is dropping on a Friday. And then 2 days from now, from Sunday to Monday, let's do that. And all right, let's talk about Armenia, because Armenia is a different issue. And it's a different problem, but it's a horrific problem. So tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Sure. So Armenia is what we call the oldest Christian nation. It was a nation that converted to Christianity en masse in the year 301 AD. And ever since then, its national identity, its culture has been intimately tied to Christianity. And this Christianity survived, you know, centuries of oppression by different empires. It survived the genocide of 1915. It survived 70 years of communist rule under communist Russia. And today, the genocide is continuing. We're seeing another phase of the destruction of the Armenian people being perpetrated by its enemies. So, 2.5 years ago, a quarter of the Armenian homeland was conquered by its neighbor Azerbaijan. This is a familial dictatorship that really commits horrible atrocities against Armenian Christians wherever they come under their control. So the entire population of this region called Nagorno-Karabakh, 120,000 people, had to flee from their lives to escape the Azerbaijani military advance. Today, the problem has kind of doubled in on itself because the Armenian government lost this war. And when a government loses a war, you basically have two options, right? One is to say, sorry, everyone, we really screwed up, we're going to resign. The other is to say, actually, it was their fault. And that is what the Armenian government has decided to do. So they are blaming the refugees themselves for this problem, and they're blaming the church in Armenia. So we started to see archbishops being thrown into jail. We've seen the prime minister use horrible language about the head of the Armenian church and call for his replacement, which is completely against Armenia's constitution. And he started to use hate speech against the refugees from Nagorno Karabakh. So they just had an election campaign in Armenia. And there was an incident where a young refugee from Nagorno Karabakh approached the prime minister on the street as he was campaigning and started to ask him some pointed questions about his policy. And the prime minister just explodes at him and starts screaming, "Why are you alive? Why didn't you die? Why didn't you die back there in Nagorno Karabakh? Why are you here? You should be dead." And then the police arrested him and put him in jail for 3 weeks. Not the prime minister, the refugee.
Can the prime minister be taken out? I mean, I don't mean taken out like violent. I mean, sorry.
No.
I mean like taken out of office. Can he be voted out?
In a parliamentary system, the parliament usually has the ability to remove a prime minister. Unfortunately, we just had an election last week that the prime minister won with considerable support from the United States and from the European Union. So this was, in our view, a massive misjudgment by the United States. And we are not in a good situation in Armenia at all. But CSI is there to support the refugees from Nagorno Karabakh, to make sure they have the resources that they need to preserve their community, to preserve their ability to speak out for themselves. And we're in this for the long haul.
Wow. I mean, again, this is a separate issue, right? We're dealing with a different issue here, but one that's equally alarming. How do you not get discouraged, Joel, with all of this? Because it is heavy and you are in it and you are dealing with this evil, looking at it every day. And it's so hard to remember Ephesians, Jen's going to laugh at me, Ephesians 6, and not to get mad at people though, because you're watching the people do this and they're clearly influenced by evil across the board. How do you not get discouraged?
For me, the secret is actually going to Armenia and meeting with Armenians, meeting with young lawyers who are putting their careers on the line to defend some of these people in court, meeting with supporters of the church who are not being intimidated, meeting with refugees who have lost everything, lost their houses, all their money, all their documents, their childhood toys and memories. Everything is just gone. And they haven't given up. In fact, a lot of them are more active now than they were before they were forced to flee their homeland.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. It's so encouraging. It's like, to me, they are the bride of Christ. They are who the church should be, just sold out. You know, that's what it says in Revelation. We overcome the enemy by the power, the blood of the Lamb, the power of our testimony, and the part we always leave off. And they love not their life unto death. And I just love that they are like, I'm going to stand up for what's right, no matter what it cost me, because the alternative is that it cost me anything anyway. And so it's just a selflessness and a bravery and a courage to be strong and courageous. And so I love that encourages you, because it encourages me hearing it.
Yeah, it's the only answer I have right now, because it does get discouraging sometimes. But when I meet these people, it's like, how can you not want to work even harder to support them if they haven't given up yet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing to consider that the work you're doing, as hard as it is, you're seeing incredible results, right? It's not easy, but you're seeing real results. You are seeing lives changed, and the fight, you have to keep the fight going, because in order to spread the gospel and serve the church, that's what we're called to do. Now I know Syria is another location we wanted to talk about, and a lot has been happening in Syria. So can you give us an update of what's happening there?
Sure. Syria is undergoing a slow Islamization process. In other words, it's becoming a lot more like Afghanistan than it used to be. Syria, until 2024, was ruled by a horrendous dictatorship, just apocalyptic scale of torture and imprisonments and mass killings. But it was a secular dictatorship, and it really preserved the secular character of the country, which is really good because Syria has lots of different religious groups who live together: Muslims, Christians, Alawis, Druzes, other groups that maybe Americans haven't heard of, but they all live in Syria. That government collapsed in December 2024, and it was replaced by a government led by the founder of Al Qaeda in Syria. So, considering that, it hasn't been as extreme as we might have thought. This new president is really trying to show the international community, the West, that he's a reasonable man, that he's someone they can do business with, that they don't have to be scared of him. Nevertheless, Syria is really going in a direction of greater Islamization. So I was just talking to a colleague who's working on a Christian village in Hama province, where when girls leave the village to go to university, Christian girls, they cover their hair because it's just not worth it otherwise. It's just not worth the harassment and the threats that they'll get if they were to be who they are, riding the bus from their village to their town. We're also seeing really prominent Christians who have a past of defending their own people being punished for it. And I'm thinking now of our friend Suleiman Khalil, who was the mayor of a Christian town in Syria called Sadad that was attacked by ISIS in 2015. And ISIS had just massacred like 50 Christians in the village next door. And then they came to his town. And he managed to organize the defense of his town and stopped ISIS from coming in and saved hundreds of lives, probably. He was imprisoned by the new government 3 months after it took power, and he's still in prison. He's been in prison for the past 16 months. No charges, no lawyer, no court hearings. They've just disappeared him, basically.
What kind of attorney could help with that in a country like that? Do you know?
That's a very good question. From what I understand, the judicial system in Syria is really not in good shape right now. And in fact, his case at one point apparently was heard by a random Sharia court judge who apparently the local militia picked out to decide whether he could go meet his wife or not. And the Sharia court judge said no. So it's not a very sophisticated legal system at this point. What we think needs to happen is that the US government needs to intervene with the new Syrian government to have him be set free.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also thinking hopefully he's evangelizing like the entire prison or jail system that he's in. And when we fast, we should pray for angels to come because that would be amazing. Like with Paul and
Yeah.
Silas. Like, let's pray for an earthquake that just opens up the prison doors. But yeah, I wish the United States would get involved. I just do not trust any government entity, to be honest. But I will be praying for him. What is his name again?
Suleiman Khalil. And
Looks like Solomon.
Exactly.
Suleiman.
Yeah, it's the Arabic version of Solomon. Yeah.
Okay.
Joel, we had a number of countries. I believe there's one more location you wanted to tackle today before we go.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Pakistan because just last week we got a new case from Pakistan that we're really trying to push and we're really trying to get people to pray for. Normally, what we do in Pakistan is we support local Christian lawyers who are able to have a reasonable amount of success in the judicial system in Pakistan. It's not like Syria. There are courts, there are lawyers. Sometimes you can get a good result. But in this particular case, a young woman named Neha, 18 years old, her parents enrolled her in a sewing course in her village in Pakistan, hoping that she could learn some skills that would help her escape the cycle of poverty that the family is trapped in. She went to the sewing course one day and didn't come home. The family fans out, searches all the fields, searches all the roads and alleys, can't find her. Finally, they report her missing to the police. After a while, the police say, "Oh, we found her. She's in a madrasa in a nearby city." And the family's lawyer, well, maybe I'll back up a little bit. Once we found out about the case, we made sure that this family had a lawyer to actually support them through this crisis. So the lawyer files a habeas corpus petition and gets this girl, Neha, brought to the court so that her family can see her, so that they can have their day in court. This was on Tuesday, June 9, for your listeners. And the court, this girl, Neha, showed up in the court covered from head to toe in Islamic garb, right? None of her body was visible at all. And the court basically just dismissed the family's petition out of hand and said she stays in the madrasa. She's Muslim now. So our contacts in Pakistan came to us and basically said, we don't know what to do about this. If the judge is just so brazenly defying the family's rights, the girl's rights, we don't know what the next step is. So that's where we come in. We're going to try to push this issue wherever we can, with the Pakistani embassy in the United States, with the parliament in the UK, with the United Nations. We're going to try to make this as embarrassing as possible for the Pakistani government so that the court system will return this girl to her family. But obviously this is very distressing for the family that they saw their daughter in court. She couldn't speak to them. They weren't allowed to speak to her. And the judge said, you can't have her.
It's unbelievable. And I think from our lenses in America and in the West, hearing this, it's like, what in the world? How is that possible, right? And this goes back to the fact that we're dealing with very real evil that is just unimaginable. And we have to pray for that family too. There's a lot on the prayer list here with the fasting list, but I love that we're calling people to do this. And fasting does change. It changes the way that for me, it changes the way that I interact with God, the intensity of it, and prayer matters. We know that prayer has real impact. And so I'm excited that we'll be able to do that here. And Joel, we'll connect on all of this more very soon. But Jen, any final words before we head off here?
No, I'm just grateful that you brought all of this to our attention. We're so grateful all the time for what Christian Solidarity International is doing. As always, we will put into our notes the website, but go ahead and give us the website again in case people want to donate as well.
Sure. The website is www.csi-usa.org. There you can learn more about all these stories. You can donate if you feel so led. You can sign up for our newsletter where we do send out regular prayer updates. Any amount of engagement you want to give, we'd be very, very grateful.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, make sure you head on over to CSI. Also, make sure you subscribe to Into the Supernatural. You can find us, obviously, on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back very soon with another episode.